The busy street outside the coffee shop felt like any other weekday afternoon. People walked fast, heads down, eyes glued to their phones, trying not to bump into each other. A warm breeze rustled the paper cups stacked at the counter inside, where the smell of fresh coffee and pastries wrapped around everyone who stepped in. Keanu Reeves sat at a corner table by the window. He wore a plain black jacket and a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. To most people, he looked like just another tired man trying to disappear in the city noise. But if you looked closely, you'd see it, the way he watched the world, quiet but awake, like he was searching for something he hadn't found yet. He sipped his coffee slowly, letting the warmth push away the ache in his chest that had been there for years. He didn't come here to be noticed. He came because he liked the old couple who owned the place, who treated him like any other customer and didn't care about red carpets or movie premieres. Across the room, a young mother named Claire struggled to balance too many things at once. Her hair was tied in a messy bun. Her shirt had a small stain from this morning's breakfast she hadn't had time to wash off, and her eyes looked like they hadn't truly rested in years. Beside her stood her daughter, Emma, a tiny girl with curly hair and wide brown eyes that seemed to see things no one else did. Emma held a small teddy bear in her arms, worn from too many bedtime hugs. She tugged at her mother's hand, but Claire was busy counting coins in her purse, trying to figure out if she had enough to pay for the small muffin Emma had begged for. Keanu noticed the little girl before he even realized he was watching. He saw the way she clutched her bear, how her eyes darted around the shop like she was looking for something. He saw the exhaustion on Claire's face, that quiet desperation parents try so hard to hide. And then, just as Claire handed over her last coins, something happened that made the entire coffee shop stop breathing for a moment. Emma's eyes locked onto Keanu across the room. She let go of her mother's hand. She stepped forward, her tiny shoes squeaking on the tile floor. Claire barely noticed until it was too late. Emma stopped a few feet from Keanu's table. She pointed her small finger straight at him. Her voice rang out clear and loud enough that even the man reading his newspaper by the door dropped it in surprise. "That's him," she said. "That's the angel." The coffee shop fell silent. The barista froze mid-pour. Claire's face drained of color. She rushed over, her hands trembling as she grabbed Emma's shoulder. "Emma, sweetheart, what did you say?" Emma didn't look away. Her eyes stayed locked on Keanu, big and round, filled with something so pure it made his heart twist. "Mommy, that's the angel from my dream. I told you he would come." Keanu felt like the world had tilted sideways. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His coffee grew cold in front of him. He looked at Claire, who looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "I'm so sorry," Claire whispered, her voice cracking. She has these dreams sometimes. She's just a child. She doesn't mean," but Keanu wasn't listening to her apologies. He looked at Emma, this tiny girl with curls and a bear pressed to her chest, and he saw it in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just sure. He knelt down so he could be eye level with her. "Hi, Emma," he said softly, his voice rough with 1,000 questions he didn't know how to ask. "What did you see in your dream?" Emma didn't hesitate. "You were standing under a big tree. You had light all around you, and you said you would help Mommy. You said not to worry anymore." Claire covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. "Emma, please don't," she started. But her daughter turned to her, her tiny hand resting on her mother's arm. "Mommy, don't be sad. He came. I told you he would." The old couple behind the counter watched with wide eyes. The other customers pretended not to stare, but they did, because everyone could feel it. Something bigger than an ordinary day had just walked into that coffee shop. Keanu looked up at Claire, his eyes soft but steady. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice so gentle it made Claire want to cry. "Are you two all right?" Claire tried to laugh, but it cracked in the middle. "We're fine," she lied. "It's just been a rough year. I'm sorry. She shouldn't have bothered you." Keanu shook his head. "She didn't bother me. Kids see things we forget how to see." He looked back at Emma and smiled. "Thank you for showing me." Emma grinned, her small face lighting up like a candle in the dark. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny crumpled piece of paper. She held it out to him. "This is for you," she said. Keanu took it carefully, unfolding the scrap with shaking hands. It was a drawing, stick figures under a big tree, with a circle of light around one figure. A smaller figure with curly hair stood beside him, holding a bear. Written in crooked letters at the bottom were 3 words, "Thank you, Angel." For a moment, the noise of the world faded. The clatter of cups, the hum of city traffic, the sharp smell of burnt coffee, it all disappeared. There was only this tiny girl, her tired mother, and a man who never asked to be called an angel but now wondered if maybe, just maybe, he could be what they needed. Claire gathered Emma in her arms, whispering apologies again. But Keanu stood up and stopped her with a look so kind it made her knees weak. "Can I buy you both lunch?" he asked. "Just let me do that, please." Claire wanted to say no. Pride wrestled with need inside her chest, but then she felt Emma's tiny hand pat her cheek. "Mommy, let him," Emma said. "He's the angel." And in that small coffee shop, with the city roaring outside and people pretending not to stare, a door quietly opened. A door that would lead 3 strangers down a road. None of them could have imagined. The coffee shop felt warmer after that moment. The rain that had started tapping against the windows seemed softer somehow, like the world outside was slowing down to listen to the quiet miracle unfolding at that corner table. Claire sat across from Keanu, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug she hadn't dared buy for herself in months. She felt out of place in this gentle warmth, like someone would tap her shoulder and tell her she didn't belong there. But every time she glanced up, Keanu was still there, calm, kind, with no sign that he wanted to leave. Emma sat beside him, happily munching on a muffin bigger than her tiny hands. Every so often, she would look up at him, eyes wide and trusting, like she knew something no one else did. Keanu watched Claire over the rim of his cup. His voice was gentle when he spoke. "Emma said you've had a rough year," he said. "What's been happening?" Claire hesitated. The old fear crept up her throat. She'd spent so long pretending she was fine that the words felt heavy in her mouth. But something about his steady eyes made it safe to say them out loud. "I lost my job last year," she said quietly, staring at the swirl of cream in her coffee. "Emma's dad, he left when she was a baby. It's just been us. I've been doing small jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing, but I can't keep up. Rent's late. Daycare costs too much. Sometimes I don't know if we'll make it another week." She blinked fast, trying to keep the tears from falling. She didn't want pity. She just wanted to stay strong for Emma. But her voice trembled anyway. "We come here sometimes so she can have a muffin and feel normal. I pretend it's all okay. I'm sorry, you don't need to hear my problems." Keanu shook his head slowly, his eyes kind but firm. "Don't apologize," he said. "No one should have to pretend they're fine when they're not." He turned to Emma and gave her a small smile. "You're a very brave little girl, you know that." Emma beamed, her mouth dusted with crumbs. "Mommy says brave girls help angels," she said proudly. Claire let out a shaky laugh, covering her mouth. "Emma, you say the strangest things." "Sometimes." Keanu leaned back, letting the moment breathe. For a while, they just sat there. 3 people who had started the day as strangers, but now felt tied together by something bigger than any of them could explain. When the plates were cleared, Claire tried to reach for her purse. "I can pay you back," she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "I don't want charity." Keanu placed his hand gently over hers to stop her. "This isn't charity," he said softly. "This is what people do when they see someone who needs help. It's what I wish someone had done for me when I was younger." His words surprised her. She didn't know his story, only what people said in headlines and gossip magazines. But now she wondered what storms he'd walked through to understand so deeply. What it felt like to be alone. Emma tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide. "Are you going away now?" she asked, her voice small. Keanu glanced at Claire, his expression careful, like he didn't want her to push too far too fast. "Only if your mommy wants me to," he said. "But if you'd like, I'd like to see you both again. Maybe help a little more." Claire's walls rose fast. Her chest tightened with the familiar fear. Trusting people always came with a cost she couldn't pay. Why would you do that? She asked, her voice cracking. You don't owe us anything. Keanu looked at her for a long moment, his eyes steady and honest. Emma pointed at me today and called me an angel, he said quietly. I don't think I'm that, but maybe I can be the kind of person she thinks I am. I'd like to try. If you'll let me. Emma didn't wait for her mother to answer. She wrapped her small arms around Keanu's neck, pressing her cheek to his shoulder. You came just like you said you would, she whispered, her tiny voice muffled. Claire felt the tight knot in her chest loosen. She reached out and gently rested her hand on her daughter's back. Okay, she said, her voice breaking but full of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, okay, we'll let you try. And in that tiny coffee shop, with the rain still tapping at the windows and strangers pretending not to stare, a simple promise was made. A promise that kindness wasn't a lie, that people could be more than what the world expected them to be. Keanu sat there with Emma in his arms and Claire's shaking hand resting near his. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he'd found exactly what he'd been searching for without even knowing it. The days that followed felt like a soft dream for Claire, the kind of dream she was scared to wake up from. She had spent years holding the world together with nothing but her own tired hands, always telling herself not to hope for too much because hope hurt when it broke. But now there was Keanu, showing up at her door with a warm smile, and that steady calm in his eyes that made her believe, just for a moment, that maybe good people still existed. He didn't come with grand promises or bags of money. He came with small things that felt big, groceries when the fridge was empty, a bag of Emma's favorite muffins, a small envelope with enough to cover the daycare fee Claire had been too afraid to ask for help. With Emma adored him every time he knocked, she would run to the door like a spark of sunshine, her curls bouncing, her tiny voice shouting, "The angel is here." Claire would laugh and hide her face behind her hand, embarrassed by her daughter's honesty, but Keanu never corrected. Emma, he'd smile and say, "Hi, sunshine," and lift her into his arms like she was his own. One evening, Claire sat across from him in her small kitchen while Emma drew pictures at the table. The old light flickered above them, the hum of the fridge, the only sound between their words. You don't have to keep doing this, Claire said suddenly, her fingers nervously tracing the chipped edge of her coffee mug. You've done enough already. Keanu leaned back in his chair, studying her face. I want to, he said gently. I told you, you don't have to do this alone anymore. Claire looked away, her throat tight. You don't even know. What if we're just another problem for you to fix? Keanu's eyes softened. You're not a problem, Claire. You're people, good people who need someone to stand beside them for once. She wanted to believe him, every part of her did, but fear clung to her like a second skin. She remembered the promises other people had made, promises that had turned to dust. When the world got to hard. Emma's single quotes, a small voice broke the heavy silence. She held up her newest drawing, a big tree with 3 stick figures under it. One was small with curly hair, another tall with short hair, and the third with a big circle of light around his head. Above them, in crooked letters, she had written my family. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Emma, she whispered. Keanu took the picture from Emma's hands and studied it like it was something precious. He knelt down beside her chair. This is beautiful, he said softly. Why did you draw us like this? Emma tapped the circle of light with her tiny finger. Because you're our angel, she said. Mommy says angels come when you need them most. Keanu looked at Claire, his eyes glassy. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he wrapped his arm around Emma's shoulders, pulling her close. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch with her teddy bear tucked under her chin, Claire walked Keanu to the door. The hallway outside her apartment was cold and smelled like old paint, but inside, for the first time in a long time, warmth had come back. Why us? She asked him, her voice low, afraid of the answer. Why did you stop that day? You could have ignored us like everyone else. Keanu paused, one hand on the door frame. Because when Emma pointed at me and said those 3 words, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. like maybe all the things I've lost, all the people I couldn't save, maybe they led me right here. Maybe this is my chance to get something right. Claire's breath caught in her chest. I'm scared, she whispered. What if you go away too? He reached out and touched her arm. His fingers warmed through the thin fabric of her sweater. Then we'll take it one day at a time, he said softly. But I'm not going anywhere, Claire. Not if you'll have me here. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, her head resting on his chest. It wasn't the kind of hug that fixed everything. It was the kind that said, maybe we can stand here together a little longer. And in the tiny hallway of a rundown apartment building, with the world still rushing by outside, Claire let herself believe that sometimes when you're brave enough to let someone in, even an ordinary day can feel like a miracle. Days turned into weeks, and each day felt a little less heavy than the last. Claire still woke up every morning with worry curled tight in her chest, but now there was something else too, a small, trembling hope that maybe this time things would not fall apart. Keanu never missed a visit. Some days he came by with bags of fresh groceries that filled Claire's empty fridge. Some days he just knocked on the door with nothing but a soft smile and a big cups of warm coffee. He always sat on the worn-out couch with Emma curled up beside him, her tiny head resting against his arm while she told him about the dreams she kept having. Dreams where he stood under that same big tree, light all around him, promising that everything would be okay. Claire watched them from the kitchen doorway sometimes, her hands wrapped around a dish towel, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. She'd never seen Emma laugh so freely, her small shoulders no longer hunched under the weight of things a child should never carry. But life, as it always does, found a way to remind Claire how fragile hope could be. One night, she came home, late from a housekeeping shift, her feet dragging, her eyes heavy. When she stepped into the apartment, she found a white envelope slipped under the door. She knew what it was even before she opened it. An eviction notice, the words blurred. As she read them, 3 weeks behind on rent, no more extensions, pay by the end of the month or leave. She felt the walls close in around her. Her breaths came fast and shallow. She sank down onto the floor, her back against the door, clutching the envelope like it was a piece of her life someone had ripped out. Emma padded into the hallway, her teddy bear dragging behind her. Mommy, what's wrong? She asked sleepily, her voice so small that it broke something inside Claire's chest. Claire pulled her daughter into her arms, burying her face in Emma's soft curls. Nothing, baby, she whispered, her voice cracking. Everything's fine. But the next day, when Keanu knocked on the door with his usual soft knock and gentle smile, Claire couldn't pretend anymore. She opened the door, her eyes red, her hands trembling. She didn't even say hello. She just held out the envelope, her lip trembling. He read it in silence, his face calm but his eyes stormy underneath. When he finished, he looked up at her, and she braced herself for pity, the look she hated most. But he didn't give her pity. He gave her something stronger. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. Claire laughed bitterly, wiping at her eyes. Because you've already done so much. You brought us food. You gave us hope. I can't keep taking and taking. I can't ask you to fix my mess. Keanu stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Claire, he said, his voice firm but kind, this isn't your mess alone anymore. It's ours. You and Emma are not alone. Not while I'm here. Emma peeked out from behind Claire's legs, clutching her teddy bear. Is the angel sad? She asked softly. Keanu's single quotes S expression melted. He knelt down and pulled her into a gentle hug. No, sunshine, he said, his voice warm and steady. The angel's not sad. The angel is here, always. Claire felt her knees go weak, but she stayed standing, the words sinking deep into the place where fear always lived. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, Claire and Keanu sat together at the small kitchen table. They talked about options, finding a cheaper apartment, calling charities for help, looking for extra work. Claire hated every word that made her feel helpless, but Keanu never once made her feel small. What if we can't find anything in time? She asked, her voice so quiet it barely filled the room. Keanu reached across the table, taking her cold hand in his warm one. "Then you and Emma stay with me until we do," he said without hesitation. Claire's eyes widened. "Keanu, I can't. We can't." He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Yes, you can, and you will. Because you're family now, you and Emma. And family doesn't let each other fall." The words felt too big to believe. They pressed against every scar life had left on her. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw that he meant it. She saw it in the way he looked at Emma like she was a treasure, in the way he looked at her like she was worth saving even on her worst day. That night, Claire lay awake long after the lights went out, listening to the soft hum of the city outside her window. She thought about how close they still were to losing everything. But for the first time in years, the fear didn't crush her, because now when it knocked at her door, she knew she wouldn't have to open it alone. The days after the eviction notice felt like walking on a tightrope over a deep, dark hole. Claire tried to keep her chin up for Emma, but every moment felt like it could crumble under her feet. Still, every time the fear crept in, she'd hear Keanu's steady voice in her head. "You're not alone. Family doesn't let each other fall." Keanu came by almost every evening now. He'd knock on their door with a gentle smile, and that calm look in his eyes that made Claire feel like maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through this. Emma would run to him like sunshine, bursting into the room, her tiny arms wrapping around his neck as she shouted, "The angel's here." One night, they sat together on the old couch. Emma had fallen asleep, her head on Keanu's leg, her teddy bear squished under her small arm. Claire sat curled up on the other end, hugging her knees. The eviction notice folded and refolded so many times it looked like a scrap ready to fall apart. "She deserves better than this," Claire whispered, her voice cracking through the quiet. "She deserves a home where she doesn't have to worry if she'll have a bed tomorrow." Keanu's hand rested on Emma's hair, brushing her curls back gently. "She does," he said. "And so do you." Claire let out a shaky laugh. "Sometimes I feel like I'm holding everything together with tape and hope. What happens when it rips?" Keanu looked at her, his eyes steady and full of something stronger than any promise. "Then we find stronger tape," he said softly, "and we hold it together again. Claire, you've done more than anyone could. You've carried this alone for so long. Let me carry it with you now." She wanted to believe it. Every tired bone in her body wanted to believe he'd stay. But old fears whispered that everyone leaves. That kindness is just something people give when they have extra to spare. And when they run out, you're left with nothing. Maybe Keanu saw the worry in her eyes. Maybe he felt her walls trying to climb back up, because he leaned closer and said, "I know what it's like to lose people. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough. But I also know this. We don't have to let that be the end of the story." Claire's throat tightened. "Why us?" she asked again, the question she always came back to. "You could do anything, help anyone. Why keep coming back here?" Keanu looked down at Emma, sleeping so peacefully despite the world around her. "Because she saw something in me I'd forgotten was there," he said. "She reminded me that I can still be more than just someone people watch on a screen. She made me feel like maybe I can be family to someone again." The word family made Claire's chest ache and fill up all at once. She had learned not to trust that word. People said it too easily and took it back just as fast. But the way Keanu said it, like it was a vow instead of a word, made her want to try. The next day, he picked them up in his old Jeep. They spent the afternoon driving around the city looking at small apartments for rent. None of them were fancy, but every one of them was a chance to start over. Claire caught herself laughing as Emma ran down empty hallways, pretending each new space was a castle. Every giggle reminded Claire what she was fighting for. At the last apartment, Keanu stood beside Claire, his hands in his pockets. Emma was in the bedroom, measuring the window with her arms wide, shouting, "My bed will fit right here." Claire sighed, leaning against the doorway. "It's small," she said, "but it's safe, it's warm. We could make it work." Keanu looked at her, that soft smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. "You don't have to do this alone," he said again. "Let me help with the deposit. Let me make this part easier." Her pride flared up fast. She opened her mouth to say no, the old reflex of don't owe anyone anything ready to spill out. But then she saw Emma standing in that empty room, her little hands pressed against the window, her eyes bright. Claire closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, but not because we're helpless, because you're family now." Keanu's smile widened, but it wasn't just a smile, it was a promise. "Good," he said, "because that's all I've ever wanted to be." That night, back at the old apartment, Claire tucked Emma into bed one last time under the cracked ceiling and the peeling paint. Emma sleepily wrapped her arms around her teddy bear and whispered, "Mommy, did the angel find our home?" Claire brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead, her own eyes stinging with tears that didn't feel heavy anymore. "Yes, baby," she said, her voice warm. "He did. He really did." The move happened on a Saturday morning when the sun rose warm and soft, as if even the sky knew they were ready for something new. Claire stood in the old apartment one last time, staring at the empty walls that had seen too many nights of her quiet tears, too many mornings when she woke up, afraid they'd lose everything. Emma ran through the small rooms, her laughter echoing like a song, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. She stopped by the window where the paint was cracked, pointing out at the street below. "Mommy, this is the last day our angel has to carry us here," she said proudly. Claire's throat tightened. "Our angel." She looked over her shoulder where Keanu stood, sleeves rolled up, boxes in his arms, sweat on his brow, but that same calm, steady smile on his face. He didn't just show up for the big moments, he stayed for the small ones too. That's what made him real. The new apartment wasn't fancy, but to Claire and Emma it felt like a castle. The walls were clean, the heater worked, and the windows let in so much sunlight that Emma called it their forever morning place. Keanu paid the deposit without a second thought, and when Claire tried to argue, he just smiled. "Let me do this," he'd said. "It's not charity, it's family." Emma got the small bedroom at the end of the hall. She dragged her mattress to the window just like she'd planned. She even made a little sign in her messy crayon handwriting, "Emma's room. No monsters allowed." That first night, Claire stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep. She felt the weight that had pressed on her chest for years slip away, piece by piece. She walked into the living room, where Keanu sat on the floor putting together an old bookshelf they'd found at a thrift store. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low and warm. Claire nodded, sinking down next to him on the floor. "Better than okay," she said, her eyes shining with tears she didn't need to hide anymore. "I didn't know how heavy it all was until you showed up, until you helped me carry it." Keanu reached over and squeezed her hand. "I didn't save you, Claire. You saved yourself. I just reminded you you didn't have to do it alone." She laughed softly, pressing her palm to his. "Emma thinks you're an angel." Keanu's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Emma's smarter than most grown-ups I know." They finished the shelf together, their knees bumping, their laughter filling the little living room that already felt like home. When they were done, Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. "What now?" she asked, her voice quiet in the soft glow of the hallway light. Keanu tilted his head, resting it gently against hers. "Now we keep showing up," he said, "day after day, even when it's hard. That's what family does. We keep showing up." Sometime later, Claire drifted off on the couch, too tired to move, her head resting in the soft curve of his arm. Keanu stayed awake, listening to the city outside the window, the hum of new hope inside the walls of this tiny apartment. He thought about how he'd spent years drifting through rooms, full of bright lights and empty promises, always giving but never really feeling like he belonged. But now, sitting there with Claire asleep beside him and Emma dreaming in her bed, he felt something settle in his chest, something like home. Weeks turned into months, and life found its own gentle rhythm. Claire found steady work cleaning offices during the day while Emma went to a local daycare where she made new friends every evening. They'd come home to warm food and quiet laughter. Keanu never missed dinner when he was in town. Sometimes he read Emma bedtime stories, his calm voice making her eyelids grow heavy until she curled up with her teddy bear and whispered, Good night, Angel. And Claire, she never stopped waiting for the day he'd say he couldn't stay anymore, that the real world needed him back. But that day never came. He showed up for every scraped knee, every surprise bill, every tiny victory. He stood beside her when she signed up for a night class to finish her high school diploma. He cheered louder than anyone when Emma stood on a tiny stage at daycare and sang her heart out at the spring show. One night, long after Emma had gone to sleep, Claire stood on the balcony with Keanu, the city lights stretching far and wide below them. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting every bit of her gratitude, her fear, her hope, you know. She said softly, her voice trembling, "She saved me, not you, Emma." If she hadn't pointed at you that day. Keanu smiled, slipping his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Maybe she saved us both," he said. "Sometimes it takes a little girl to remind us that the world still has good people in it, that maybe we can be the good people too." And standing there under the quiet sky, Claire knew that the three words her daughter had spoken in that small coffee shop months ago, "That's the angel," were never really about saving them from the world. They were about saving them for each other. Because sometimes, hope doesn't come wrapped in big miracles or grand gestures. Sometimes, hope is just an ordinary man sitting in a coffee shop, an exhausted mother with no more coins left in her purse, and a little girl brave enough to say what grown-ups forget how to believe. Sometimes, hope is family.